in here or there, but I'm going to go ahead and start rambling, which I will talk your heads off. So there are some things I'm going to put a timer on myself so that I don't turn this into a 2 hour long podcast with Autumn. So the reason that I do these things is because when I first started competing, which was my first show was in 2004, we didn't have resources. It was if you happen to know someone who had competed, that was your resource. And it took me many years of frustration to try to find answers all in one spot, and not just answers, but the reliable resources. So that's why I do this, is because I want to take what I have learned from this sport and what I've learned from the judges, and I want to present that to you all, so that you don't have to go dig the way that I did. That was very frustrating, and it felt like a big waste of time and energy. So that's why I put these on. If you hopefully you all do know a little bit about my journey, but if you don't, I'll keep it pretty short. I've competed for 21 years. It took me over 15 years to get my pro status. I think 11 national shows before I actually broke through to pro level. And then even competing as a pro, it still took me 5 years to qualify for the Olympia. So I'm not an overnight success, from what people see initially, but I think that has taught me a lot of hard lessons that hopefully you all don't have to go through, which is why I want to help you guys so that you get there faster than I did. So just for the format of this live, I am going to ask that we all put ourselves on mute for the time being, but I'm going to go through some things that I want to highlight and deliver to you all on mindset, and then I will kind of ebb and flow with some submitted questions that we got, but then I want to open the floor for you all to ask me questions. So there will be times where I ask you to unmute yourselves, but just to eliminate background noise, and I get easily distracted. So just if you haven't already, just go ahead and hit that mute button for me. And yeah, I'm just gonna, there's a few things I want to say beforehand. Typically I do these meetings just for my posing course members once a month, but because this is open, I just want to make very clear that I am not a judge. I have test judged before and I have stage expediting experience, but I want you all to know that, because what I teach you and what I deliver here, I want to equip you all to have conversations with judges so that you can hear it from them firsthand. So I always do my best to bridge the gap and make this digestible, but I will tell you, it is always better to ask a judge firsthand if you have that access. Also, because I'm a prep coach, out of respect for my own prep clients and for you all and for your prep coaches and myself, there's certain topics that I can't discuss, which is basically your physique readiness, what division you should do. I don't discuss prep protocols, including what to eat backstage or how to pump backstage, because those are conversations that you should be having with your prep coach, and I don't want to cause any confusion for anyone. So just for lines of integrity, that's why I don't cover those topics. But anything else stage related goes. Anything female to female goes. I know a lot of us have male prep coaches that we might not really be comfortable asking certain female questions, specifically around you know, uh, like menstrual cycles, or like just the stupid things we have to go through on show day, like not peeing on ourselves. It's always awkward. So I do want you to feel comfortable talking with me about those things when we get there. So I'm going to start this off with some more of the mindset topic around leading into the show, and I'm just going to kind of talk at it from my experience, just to give you all some ideas. I do realize that my entire life is committed to this sport for the time being. I know that's not how most lifestyles are, so that's why I say take my ideas and kind of make them yours where you can apply them, because we all have different lifestyles. We all have different schedules, different jobs, different goals, and priorities. So when I say these things, that doesn't mean that if you can't do it this way, that you're not going to be successful, but you should kind of start to take these and say, how can I make this work for me? So the most important thing to realize about this sport is you only have so much control in it. And there are so many variables that we cannot and that we are not supposed to control. And it took me a long time to realize that, because I used to I'm a responsibility person. I think if I can control this, then that's me taking responsibility of my outcomes, which is good to a degree. But we also have to realize where that drops off, and life will teach you very quickly where you are not in control. And at that point, I look at it kind of like a yin and a yang. It's like if we get really good at yin, then we also have to get good at yang, meaning sometimes the other side of equipping ourselves is not being in control, but being receptive and adaptive. And that has become my number one weapon. I recognize further out that I can't control everything, but I can control my thoughts and how I choose to react to things. So if we're just talking about prep stress, I 100% promise you that life is going to test you, and it's not always going to be as it seems. I've been tested in some really weird ways, and some of them aren't even prep related. I would say that they are external things outside of competing, but that still affect my mental or emotional capacity. And so a lot of me being good as a competitor is actually me managing the outside components in the circle outside of competing. And so I run 3 businesses. I have 3 businesses, and that's not easy. But in order for me to be a good competitor, that means I have to handle my business outside of competing. And that also means that I have to create a boundary for myself outside of competing. Like when I do business, that is my focus. When I do prep, that is my focus. And that doesn't mean over the course of months, that might be within the hour. So I'm getting better. I'm not perfect. I'm getting better at the practice of establishing my boundaries, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen me talk about this in my stories. First, figuring out what those boundaries are for you. There are mental boundaries, emotional boundaries, actual physical boundaries. So it'd be a good idea for you guys to start asking yourself, like, where are my boundaries in my areas of life, and especially with people? So the deeper I get into prep, the stronger my boundaries have to be to keep those compartments separated. And honestly, that sucks. It sucks for me in prep when at this point, the dieting isn't the hardest part. It's managing my.
What?
Oh, sorry. If anybody just popped onto the meeting, I'm going to ask you guys just to mute yourselves until I do open up the floor. And I think we just had a couple people pop in, but with the boundary setting, it's really tough to take people that we love and ask them to give us space. And it's taken me many years to even feel okay with me doing that myself. But when I look at it as means for survival, that's sort of how I have to treat it. And if people deeply and truly care about you and your goals and your dreams, they will find a way to understand. Part of the hardest part of competing is you lose people and friends, people who you thought were your friends or your loved ones. That's a really tough thing to deal with, because this sport is selfish, and we have to be selfish because we are the ones that are doing the work. Other people aren't doing that work for us, and they can't know how that feels unless they have been in the seat. And so it almost helps if you think like you're going to live your life, you're going to serve by example by pushing toward your dreams, and that's going to turn some people off, but it's also going to turn some people on. And I've lost people who I thought were my friends or supporters, but in the long run it wasn't really a loss, because I gained more people back in that space who are supposed to be here, and they're people who I can help by me carrying my actions and my passion in this example. So that's just something to kind of accept. People show their true colors in prep, and that hurts sometimes, but you can also kind of separate that. Like I actually have a therapist now that I talk with her about these things, and I journal a lot. And so just offloading that in some way, or getting some sort of a soundboard is great if you've got someone that you can talk to. That's a good way to manage those aspects. But then your time management is also extremely important. So I block things out and I treat everything in my schedule like an appointment, including my workouts. So I prioritize, I have the option to prioritize my time block for me. And I treat that as it's the same way I would with an appointment with a client. If I wouldn't show up late for a client, I don't show up late for myself. If I'm expected to show up in uniform, that means my uniform that day is my gym attire. I have that in my car ready to go. I've got my shoes everywhere that I need to make sure that I don't have an excuse not to show up for my job in my uniform. And so having backups is important and planning ahead is important. But I think one thing that I underestimated early on that I'm getting more realistic about with myself now is to a lot more time than you think you need for that block. So even little things like, oh, if it's going to take me 15 minutes to get to the gym, I carve out 20 minutes because realistically, I'm going to forget something in prep and that's going to cost me an extra minute. And if I get on the road and I have to go back to my house, that can add up to an extra hour in your day. So I have this little trigger in my head that says, if I hear myself and I say, I'll do that later, or I'll remember to do that on the way out the door, I call bullshit on myself. I say, no, Autumn, you're not going to remember that. Stop everything you're doing right now and get ahead of it. That so if I think there's something I need to grab for the gym the next day and I say, I'll do it later, I stop what I'm doing and I go put that bag in my car so that I don't end up accidentally adding extra time. Or self-care is really important. So if you are someone who is extremely busy and you've got a lot of people relying on you, whether those are clients or your boss or your family, other people that you're actually responsible for their lives, just remember that we hear it all the time, but it just never hurts to hear it again, that you cannot serve other people if you can't even serve yourself. You might be able to temporarily, but you're not going to be able to do that long term. So making sure that you take care of yourself, or even in the depths of prep, that is going to be crucial for your success. So I'm still going to hit on some things here, but they kind of tie in closer to show day. So I would say those things that I mentioned are things to be practicing months and weeks out. But especially as you get closer to show, you also need to make sure that you're carving out time for not just your workouts, but the things around your workouts. Like posing does get overlooked a lot because we are so busy and because we're so taxed and we're tired. Like there are times where, trust me, I don't want to pose. But if you can show up for yourself in your practice for 2 minutes at any point in your day, that's better than 0 minutes. And that will tie into some of the questions we got later when I address these things of like how and when you should practice your posing. But make sure that you carve out time for those things, especially like your meditation. Visualization is huge. And going into a winning mindset, I think one of the most powerful things that you can do for yourself is to create a reality before you get there. So this sounds ridiculous, but the closer I get to show, I make sure to add 30 seconds to each of my posing practice, and I practice winning. And you can look up podcasts and TED Talks on this, on how body language reverse sends signals to your brain. And this is so stupid. But even in my practice, I make sure to take my hands overhead in a victory pose by myself in my room, because that is a body language signal of success. And that does rewire your brain. So you can do that in private if it feels ridiculous, but I encourage you to practice what it would feel like winning that overall title or that trophy or your pro card. And creating those feelings in that reality is only going to fast forward what actually happens. And so like if you can go there in your mind before you get there on stage, it will feel familiar. It'll feel like it's already happened to you. And I can't tell you how many years that I practiced winning my pro card as I was falling asleep at night, driving in my car. Like I dreamed about it and I felt it before it ever happened. But I imagined how would it feel to hear my loved ones cheering for me? How would it feel to call my dad afterwards and say, hey, I did it? Those that's emotional. It's important for you guys to do those things. And I think that's part of enjoying competing and your experience in it. It's a job. This is a hard ass sport, but those are the fun parts. And ultimately, what I think bodybuilding stages are great platforms for us to practice manifesting and creating our dreams. So that's what I like leading up into the show and into your practice. I could go on another tangent on things that I do before show day, but that's the take home I want you guys to actually start applying is feeling and connecting yourself with success before it happens. So I'm going to put a little stamp on that for my mindset talk for you all right now. I do want to get into some of these submitted questions, and then I'm also going to open up the floor for you all to ask me questions. So this is a posing area question that I think is a great one to start with. Someone asked, what are the judges looking for in figure, which I am going to elaborate there, but also want to hit on some of the other divisions, since we've got a multitude of divisions here today. So I will go ahead and tell you guys, with all of the different organizations out there, I do speak from more of an NPC IFBB standpoint because that is, I would say, the most volume for our competitors, but there are lots of organizations. And so if you're ever not sure about what the organization is looking for specifically in a division, definitely go to your organization website, and each one should have a breakdown of textually what they are looking for and some photos for examples. But if you are competing in the IFBB, CPA, or NPC, Becky Clausen is my favorite source to follow of how she makes these things understandable for us. And she does an excellent job of breaking down what the judges want to see, how the competitors aligned with that, or what they don't want to see. So that's who I actually follow when I need a little bit deeper of an understanding. Her Instagram is FitPro Becky, if you all don't already follow her. But for the figure division, they want to see a very strong V taper. And so you can just imagine an upside down pyramid where it's that wide base, meaning from the shoulders through the lats, through the waistline, it all narrows down. And then sort of in a balanced way, the lower body still matches the upper body in symmetry. So you can almost think like more along the lines of like a martini glass. But they are looking for that V taper in every single pose that we do. So developmentally, that means capped shoulders. Most importantly, the big, wide, thick back development, but then also having a nice quad sweep to balance that. We still want the upper body to be a little bit more dominant than the lower body for figure. And then even from side to side, doing our best to match those symmetries from left to right. If you have scoliosis like me, that's quite a challenge. But then also making sure that other body parts aren't too dominant. So posing is a huge aspect in that because how we pose is going to amplify certain body parts or downplay certain body parts. So the opposite of that is wellness. And wellness is more of an A shape where the base is wider. So the lower body should be the widest point through the quads, definitely through the glutes. And then the upper body starts to sort of taper down in development or width. So even with your wellness posing, if you're someone who's borderline figure, you can still pose in a way that shows that lower body dominance. And even with bikini, I would say that's more of that's almost perfectly upper to lower balance in more of an hourglass shape. So they don't want those extreme X shapes like you would see in women's physique where the shoulders are super broad, the back is really thick, and then the quad sweep is huge. They don't want that sort of dramatic dynamic, but with bikini, they still want the balance of a nice shoulder development, a slender looking frame, so not too much thick mass, and then also having the appropriate glute development and leg development to balance the upper body. So really with bikini, it's almost like they don't want any specific body part to be overdeveloped. Everything should be in balance, upper to lower and front to back. And so that's actually why wellness came about, because so many bikini competitors were having trouble fitting their bodies, what their genetics and development wanted to do to fit into the mold of bikini, because typically a lot of females carry lower body mass, and now they've created a division where that can fit in more easily. So if you think of the divisions as shapes, figure we want the V shape, wellness is going to be more like an A shape, and then bikini is going to be more like an hourglass, like I guess like an I or an H shape. So I hope that kind of explains what they are looking for as the silhouette. And that is why that's why we spend so much time and effort putting into posing, because you can have any of those bodies developmentally, but how you present your body is going to tie into what the judges see. So I work with that all the time, where I might have someone who carries a lot of muscle mass in one area, but we actually need to pose them in a way to downplay that mass or bring up the shape or development of another body part to most closely match that silhouette of what the judges want for each division. So that being said, I'm going to pause my end on the submitted question, but I do want to open up the floor right now. Do any of you all have questions along those lines of what the judges are looking for or what we're trying to accomplish in our poses? Feel free to unmute yourselves. Are we shy today, or do we not have questions in that area? You can drop in the chat too if you want to. Okay, I'm going to take that as moving along to another question. So
Sorry, Autumn.
yeah, Martina.
Maybe you could speak about the level of conditioning in terms of
Yes,
what they're looking for.
I will do my best. This is a perfect example of having a visual is helpful. So if you do go to the websites where they have those examples, here's the tricky part. And I look at it like a spectrum. The most confusing part, I think, about conditioning is the parameters within each division. And it's very common that as a competitor, we hear things like, you need to be more conditioned or you were too conditioned. And that's extremely confusing because we're not just being judged on one component. So because if you all ever see a scorecard, there aren't boxes that say conditioning, development, genetic shape, posing. The judges don't have that. They literally have a sheet that says your competitor number, probably your name, and then a blank spot for them to write down their rank. And so just think of your conditioning as one variable or one factor of the entire package. And I'm going to use our top athletes sort of as an example of that. So when you look at, we'll just say the Olympia, if you look at any division of the Olympia, we'll just say top 5, they are all going to have slightly different varying degrees of conditioning. But even if they all had the same conditioning, it's still that total package, meaning across the board, you have to have the right balance of conditioning to show the development that they want to see, that silhouette shape that we're trying to show. And that is a very fine line when it comes to what division you're competing in. So if we looked at bikini on one end of the spectrum and female bodybuilding on the opposite end, those are the extremes. So bikini is going to be that softer, still having a good layer of body fat for shape and health. That sounds kind of funny to say, but the emphasis on healthy aesthetics for bikini is something the judges are looking for. Whereas I don't think that's as expected on the opposite end of female bodybuilding because it's so extreme. And then when we look at these divisions in between, so moving from bikini to wellness, wellness competitors should still be similar in body fat ranges and conditioning as bikini, but because of the development, it promotes a completely different look. So really the line between bikini and wellness is coming down more to muscle development and where that muscle is developed on those physiques. Getting into figure, that degree of conditioning, I would say, is an edge tighter, a little bit more, still not quite as extreme as female bodybuilding, but they do expect a little bit more conditioning in figure than wellness. And then even if a wellness competitor and a figure competitor had the same body fat levels, that development again is what ties into separating those divisions. So if a wellness competitor had more upper body development, but the same conditioning as a figure competitor, a judge might say something like, you look more like a figure competitor because of your development. And then tying into women's physique, those conditioning levels do get pushed because that is something that they're looking for, those muscular details, which are going to show the leaner and leaner you get, that's where you start to see those striations and those muscle fibers. And a term you guys might hear is graininess, which is not easy to define, but I think we can all see that as the skin gets thinner, the vascularity is more obvious. The muscle just doesn't have that, I hate to even use this word, it's kind of weird, but like that juicy look. So having those levels of body fat it is what separates some divisions, but it's not the only variable that separates divisions. I do see a lot of figure competitors who are on the conditioned side, and it's almost questionable, like, should they have gone into women's physique? Or some of the judges will say, you looked great, but you were a little bit too conditioned for what we are rewarding for this division. And that's a really fine line too. And that's why it's important to kind of communicate with your coach and the judges, because the leaner and leaner you get, the more conditioned you get, you might actually be sacrificing some of that beautiful full shape that they want in these divisions. And so it is very common for a bikini competitor to maybe get a little bit too lean or to lose the shape of their whole body or certain body parts, like if the glutes go really flat. And that's why this is such a fine art to master, especially if you're competing in a more muscular division like figure or women's physique. You do want to have that level of conditioning, but you also need to have the muscle mass to go with it. So what we don't have are numbers. I think that's what makes our sport hard. There's no number that we can use and say, I met that criteria. And it can be really frustrating when you show up on show day and you're like, man, I'm peeled. I look great. And that's still not what the judges want to see in your division. So that's probably the best that I can answer it. But these are great questions for you to ask the judges when you get the opportunity, like at a posing clinic, that if you are in show shape when you go to a posing clinic, that's an excellent question to ask a judge and say, hey, I'm this many weeks out. Do you think that my level of conditioning is appropriate? Or even if you can't get to a posing clinic, that's a excellent question to ask a judge when you are asking for feedback later on, is you can say, do you think I met the appropriate conditioning for the division expectation? So at least what you and your coach can do is say, okay, I don't need to change my conditioning much, but I do need to develop this body part, or maybe we need to fill out differently. So that's something that I personally, that's what I ask the judges. When I'm asking them to look at my physique, I ask them, how was my conditioning? And I take their answer and their answer only. I do not pay attention to social media. I don't pay attention to anyone else, including my friends and family. I take what that judge said. And if my coach isn't standing right next to me when we have that discussion, I screenshot it and I send it to my coach and he handles the rest. So I hope that's probably the best answer that I can give you on that specific question, but that's a great question to ask. So I'm gonna hit another submitted question here. Actually, let me ask you guys, are there other questions along those lines that you want to hit on before I do another submitted question?
Hi, Autumn. I have a question. I'm not even exactly sure how to word it. Um, how do you feel about like people switching divisions? Like, for example, I'm new to all of this,
Mhm.
and I am starting off in figure because that's how my body is naturally shaped, broader back, and I'm smaller on the bottom. But I feel like my dream physique is probably like wellness, but I really don't have the legs for that right now. Um, what has been like your experience with people probably trying to do a different division that maybe is, like it's not natural for their body? I,
I I love that you're asking this question. And I'm probably going to talk more about some considerations than just my feelings toward it, but let's just kind of talk about briefly why we're allowed some reasons why someone might want to cross over and why the sport allows that. So what you said is perfect because you already have a vision of your someday body. And we all have
Mm,
to start somewhere. We don't really get to choose where we're starting all of the time. Um, so reasons to explore other divisions are just like what you said. You might carry a good amount of muscle, and you just want to see how that appears on stage. And instead of you trying to conform your body to one specific division, it's really nice that the sport allows us to explore. And for those of you who don't know what crossing over means, basically on show day, you have the option to compete in different divisions, whether that's figure and wellness or figure and bikini or bikini, wellness, and figure. There are no restrictions at amateur shows for you to cross over. And I will use some of my own prep clients as examples. Sometimes I have really muscular competitors and their silhouette works when we put them in the poses for figure versus women's physique. They actually look like they're very close to the criteria for both. So instead of putting limitations on us as competitors, we we actually have different opportunities to display that to the judges, and then we can communicate with the judges and say, where am I the best fit for? And sometimes the judges, especially at a regional level, they might not even have a clear answer yet because that might be a different conversation. But basically, the judges have an idea in mind of what they're looking for and just who shows up that day. They can only pick from who shows up. And sometimes there is a perfect representative of that division and sometimes there's not. So it's a little bit harder at a regional level to understand this, but when you get to national levels, those parameters are a little bit more clear for us, but we still might not like I've always been still at this past Olympia, I'm one of the smallest figure competitors, not just in my height, but my frame is very petite. And I started at 89 pounds when I was 15 years old doing this. I've never had that thick muscle. So I could have explored bikini, but to be honest, that's not my personality. And that wasn't my goal. I don't think that if I competed in bikini, even if that was easier for my physique, I don't think that would have meant as much to me in my heart. And so that's why I've never gone there. I just knew that even if it was going to take me longer, just like you said, Layla, my someday goal has always been figure. And it's kind of nice sometimes if you ever want to try on different divisions to see like if that meets your personality. So from a competitor standpoint, the more comfortable you are in your personality, the more that's going to show on stage. So I'm not quite comfortable with bikini personality because that's just not how I am. So that's why I've always gravitated toward figure. That meets my personality better, even if my physique wasn't there yet. I think part of my brain even likes the idea of women's physique, but I don't know if I'll ever have a competitive women's physique body. So for us, it's nice because it's not just about the physical body, it's also about who we are off stage, or the persona that we might want to create on stage. So if you have a sassy, sexy personality, you might really, really enjoy the posing of wellness or bikini, even if your body says otherwise. So there's personal reasons to explore these divisions, but from what the judges are going to end up saying is how you measured up to those standards of the division on that day, whether that's through your actual physique or your stage performance. So that's a really great question to ask. But understanding why we can do that is one component. The other part is this is a journey. And it's very common that when you start this journey that we're just trying to fill in the gaps. Like you might have overall size that you need to put on, or specific body parts that you need to develop, or maybe it takes a while to get to the level of conditioning that you really need to bring for that division. So sometimes it's nice just to have short-term goals to get us to our long-term goal. And so I've even had a lot of athletes where they go, someday I'd like to build into figure, but I really don't have the muscle right now to compete in figure. So I think I want to try competing in bikini to get stage experience in the meantime. That's another great reason to cross over. Just to kind of lead you into your someday goal. So did that help you, Layla?
Yes, it did. Thank
Okay,
you so
good.
much. Yes.
Yeah, I love that question. I am going to pop in one from the chat that we got here. Someone asked, can I talk about glute development between bikini and wellness, and what is the main difference for the two? So that's actually a challenging question, also a good one. So the judges don't see one body part. And if they do, that might be a distraction from the overall picture. So what I want you guys to take away today is really studying and understanding what this overall package means, considering the variables of conditioning, development, genetic shape, and all the things I mentioned earlier. So you actually can have overdeveloped glutes for bikini if that throws your whole physique out of balance, meaning that's what grabs the attention of the judges. So balance means essentially not one body part overpowers another body part. So I'm going to tell you guys this trick that I use when I analyze people's posing. If I'm having trouble seeing what the judges might see, a great trick is if you just squint your eyes to where you can't see the details of the picture in front of you, and just ask yourself what jumps out at you first. If that person's glutes are the only thing that you can see when your eyes are squinted, that's probably going to be a giveaway of what the judges are almost distracted by. So when you look at it's almost like with bikini and wellness, the glute size might not differentiate that much, or it might, but what really differentiates the divisions are the surrounding muscle groups, meaning the quad development and the hamstring development. So even if you had two competitors and their glutes were the exact same, they took up the same amount of space, what's going to separate the bikini competitor from the wellness competitor is likely going to be the leg size around that space, because you will hear in bikini a lot, your quads are a little bit too developed, your hamstrings are a little bit too developed. And so that would be a consideration for that competitor to go, you know what? My body is already developed. My quads, hamstrings, and glutes are developed for wellness. Let's try wellness. So there's no magic number. There's no inches. There's no way to measure these things for us. But visually, that is probably the best trick that I can tell you guys to assess what is going to be those, if there is a distracting body part. So another example, this would be like for figure. If you're questioning if your shoulders are too big, squint your eyes and look at the picture. And if that's all you can see, if all you can see are two round shoulders, but you don't notice the lats, you don't notice the quads, that's kind of something to pay attention to and communicate with your coach. So really, talking about the development between the two, I'm sorry, the difference between the two divisions, that would be another great question for you all to ask at a posing clinic, or if you have a way to reach out to a judge themselves. There are so many great prep coaches now that most of them also can see in that way. And so that's, to me, that's what makes a great prep coach is can they differentiate between, there's what I call impressive bodies. Like when you're scrolling through Instagram, you might look at a girl's glutes and you're like, holy shit, how did she get that? And it's really impressive. But I've seen this happen where these, I'll say these prominent Instagram figures, these bodies, they get up on stage and they don't quite do as well as you would think because that might be an overdevelopment and that's not what the judges are rewarding in that division. So I hope that helps just give a spring off point for that type of a question. So I would say like it's not so much the glute development, it's probably more of the overall development and that person's overall genetic shape, also how they're posing. So yeah, do we have any more questions around these topics that you all want to ask right now, or do you want me to go ahead and get into another submitted question? I'm going to take that as I'll go to a submitted question. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk some on a little bit on the aesthetic side. We tend to get a lot of questions about hair and tan. Before I get into this, I just want to let you guys know, being candid, I am sponsored by Liquid Sunrays, and that's only who I've ever worked with. I've never used another tan company. So some of these process questions may differ from tan company to tan company, but whichever one you choose to go with, just trust that they are the professionals. All of their skin prep stuff can usually be found on their websites of the tan process or what to expect. But I'm going to sandwich some of these questions that we got to give like an overview of the tan process. So some of the questions that we got was, do you need a base tan days out before the show or just show up for the appointment? They take care of all of it. You should, if you do have specific tan questions, do reach out to them so that you can follow their instructions, because some companies do want you to have a little bit of a base. Some want zero base. When I do my skin prep, I go in with no base. I don't tan. I don't use the tanning bed for personal reasons. A lot of competitors do like to tan. Generally, they'll have you fill out a form so they can get an assessment of what type of skin that you have before you show up. But they're going to guide you through this. And typically your tan process will start the day before or a few days out. They always do a first coat. They let that develop overnight typically, because that's when the tan deepens. Then they will instruct if they do another layer. Sometimes they will have competitors rinse a layer off before they add another coat. Sometimes they don't. I don't know why exactly, but I always have a tendency to be a little bit on the light side. So I personally need 3 or more coats of tan every time. If you have a deeper skin tone naturally, obviously you're not going to need that many coats to get dark, but you still will want the tan for the rich color. So that's kind of why they assess your skin in the first place. But when you show up, as long as you've followed your exfoliating instructions and you've kept your skin moisturized leading into the week of the show, they are going to nail this tan down flawlessly for you as long as you follow those instructions. Things happen. Rain happens. For whatever reason, as adults, every other day of the year, we don't have this issue, but for some reason on show day, there's a high risk that you're going to have a pee streak down your leg. It's inevitable, but the tan company will fix that for you. I personally like to carve out extra time on my show day, spare 15 minutes here and there, just in case you do need to go back to your room to rinse, or you need them to fix your tan after they've already applied these coats. I can't stress that enough. I would rather you guys wake up extra early, save a few extra buffer minutes to go get your tan fixed by them then. And if you don't need it, that's extra time you can relax backstage. But just know that things might mess up your tan, but they are there to fix it. And they typically have someone backstage to do spot touch-ups. So that hopefully that's not like a super stressful process for you guys, but do you all have any more questions on the tan topic or the process leading up into the tan, at least through your show day? Okay, good. That means you guys have a good idea of what to expect here. With also on aesthetics, we did get questions about hair, if you should wear it curly or straight. We do talk about this a lot on our live Q&As for my course members, but we essentially, you should wear the hairstyle that you feel the most comfortable with and confident with, but it just needs to look like you made an attempt. So if you do have straight hair and you want to wear it straight, make sure that you have used a flat iron and the proper products to make it look as you intended. Or if you do want to wear it curled, at least if you're going to do your own hair, make sure that you practice it or that you have someone that you trust to style it. If you have naturally curly hair, that is a whole different process that you might need. So I would encourage you to stick with the type of hair style that you are most comfortable with on a daily basis and maybe just amp it up a little bit for show day. But from a judge's standpoint, they do not have a preference. In fact, I'm going to use the example that you've got, especially in bikini, there is a lot of long hairstyles. The only thing I'm going to say about length is you do not want your hair to touch your glutes for any division. That can actually visually affect what your torso, like how that looks to a judge. But you've got competitors who go on stage with a shaved head and they kill it. They rock that. So don't feel like you need length or a certain style to be successful in the judge's eyes. They just want it to look nice, like you tried. There is the pageantry aspect of this. I'm going to add here, though, that with hair, if you choose to use extensions, definitely put your extensions in and practice with those when you're practicing your posing. The weight and the length can throw you off, especially if you're in figure and you need to pull your hair to the side. You need to practice with your extensions in to make sure that you can manage your hair on show day. So make sure it's freshly colored. If you color it, make sure that it's nicely trimmed. Make sure that you've practiced this hairstyle, or at least you trust your hairstylist to do something that you're going to feel good about. But from the judge's eyes, they don't have specific requirements. Other than that, we just don't want the hair to be too long and mask your torso line. We have a lot of other questions I could go through, but let me just open up the floor again to you all. Do you all have any questions about what we're trying to accomplish in our posing, or what we should be considering when we're on stage scenarios that you all may have seen when you're watching a show that seem questionable or stressful, or anything around like what the judges are wanting from us? I think those are probably the most crucial questions to ask performance wise. But we can still talk about other things like the aesthetics or around performing on stage. So what questions do you all have about posing?
Stop.
Rosemary, I'm gonna put you on mute if you don't.
Oh.
If you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself if you do. Do you guys feel pretty confident in what to expect on the stage? Anybody?
Yeah, okay. So I have a quick question regarding like what to expect on the stage.
Yeah.
So like as a former dancer, like I know like when you went out on the stage, like you couldn't really see the audience, like it was dark. Is that like the same case as like bodybuilding stage? Like when you get out there, you kind of just only really see the judges and that's it.
That I have never been asked that question, but I'm really glad that you're asking that, because that does vary from show to show, and it can depend on the lighting of the room, but also the distance that the judges sit at. So some stages are lower to the ground and the judges sit a lot closer, and the stage itself is smaller in general, like the distance of the stage. Those stages almost freak me out a little bit sometimes, only because you are able to make eye contact with the judges, and depending on how bright the lights are in your face, if the light's really bright, you might not see anyone in the audience. But if it's not really bright on you, but it happens to be lit in the room, you might see a little bit more of the judges' faces. I actually have a Stage Fears webinar out talking about those things that we can do to calm ourselves down if that freaks you out. The number one tip that I have is you're not required to look at the judges. And believe it or not, the judges aren't actually looking at your face because they are looking at your body. So if you're able to see the judges because of the lighting or because of the closeness to them, a trick is to look just at their hairlines or right past it. It will look like you are looking at them, but it won't be that eye contact that can be a little bit intimidating. Or you can find the photographer out in the audience. Worst case scenario, there are usually exit signs around the room. You can just focus on an exit sign. So you don't have to look down at the judges if that bothers you. Sometimes I don't mind looking at the judges, but I will say that's from my own experience. And just as they are reading my body, I'm reading the judges' faces. So sometimes I can just tell by the expression on their face. If they look at me and there's kind of a question there, the first thing I do is go, uh-oh, am I checked in with my poses? And if you guys have my posing course, that audio command testing section where I'm talking you through the cues while you are posing, I still use that even on the Olympia stage. If I get a confused look from a judge, I'm from bottom to top checking in with, am I tensing my quads? Am I holding my core right? Am I opening my lats like I'm supposed to? Am I relaxed through my face and my hands? I designed that in the course for you guys because I know that's what I use when I see these judges' facial expressions. But again, that can tie into, I was on a stage, this can be the opposite effect actually. I was on a stage a few years ago where the lights were so bright pointed at me. My stage pictures are my favorite stage pictures I've ever had because the light looked incredible on my face and my body, but I couldn't see where the head judge was. And it was a little bit frustrating because I know better. I know what to do, but because I couldn't visually orient myself with where that head judge was sitting, I actually was aiming my poses a little bit more to the person next to them. And when I asked this head judge for feedback, he said, your side poses looked like they were angled a little bit off. And I could tell in the moment that was the case. What I should have done and what I would tell you all to do is if you look down at the floor, there's a line of tape that they have you on. It is okay to briefly look down. If your feet are parallel with that line of tape in your pose setups, that is a fast way to orient yourself if the lights are so bright that you can't find the head judge. If you can at least find that line of tape and using the stage scenarios that I have in my course, or if you don't have my posing course, just understanding how to set up your poses from the ground upward, that can reorient you very quickly. So that's an excellent question that no one's ever really asked. It's a very beneficial question to ask, but just knowing that each stage is different and you're going to have different lighting and different sizes of the stage, different feelings of intimacy with the judges and the audience. Those are those variables that you can't always control or anticipate. So I don't know if that really answered your question, Chloe. Did that help somewhat?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
Just because like I do know like I don't really have that like stage fright. It is my first show, so like I'm kind of more or less just like what to expect when I walk out on that stage. If it's gonna be like completely pitch dark and like I don't have to worry about seeing anyone, or if it's gonna be like I'm gonna see everybody out there or not.
It's generally not pitch dark. I've actually made the mistake of I shouldn't do this. I know not to do this, but sometimes I'll accidentally look right at the light and I want to blind myself for a second. I go, oh, that's stupid. I should have done that. So generally just looking out in the audience for the photographer might be a good way to prepare yourself no matter the lighting so that you at least have a focal point. I will kind of warn you guys about this a little bit. It used to be that the stages were kind of a black curtain and a few paper signs for the sponsors, but anymore, those stages have really bright LED lights and they look cool for the audience, but for us as performers, even when you turn to the back of the stage, that really bright light can be very abrasive and disorienting. So that's why when I teach you all how to pose, I say to look up where the wall and the ceiling meet, or look above the curtain. That way you don't accidentally look right into that light, so that when you do turn around and face the audience again, you're not, have those white spots from looking at the lights. But that's a really cool consideration that you thought of that. So, yeah, do we have any more open floor questions for today? There's no stupid questions. So if you have something that you're withholding, I want you to feel comfortable to ask these questions here so that you have more confidence to ask these things in posing clinics. I am going to answer this question that got dropped into the chat, because this is something that I actually do. It's one of my little things. So someone asked how I decided if I've ever decided to go with a different suit because of the stage background. I like to eliminate risks, and it is a little bit harder for the judges' eyes if your suit blends in too much with the background. So a lot of times at clinics, you'll hear judges say, if the stage has got a black curtain, don't wear a black suit, or vice versa. If we want some contrast from your suit, from your tan and the background, but I'm a little bit psycho. I will go, the show that I'm going to do, I'll go look at the stage pictures from the previous year and assume that they're probably going to use similar colors. So if they have a lot of red or orange in the background, typically, I'll probably pack a purple or bluish type suit just in case. I always bring a few suits. I have happened to accumulate them over the years. If you don't have multiple suits, which you should always have a backup suit, even if it's your practice one, just in case your suit breaks. But if you have options to play with suit colors, usually when you go to check-ins the night before, you will see the signs and the posters. And those signs and posters are generally the colors they will use for the stage background. So even when you're at check-ins the night before, you can bring your suit with you and kind of hold it up and say, does this contrast enough, or is it too clashy? So I have switched suits the night before. You guys have maybe seen that, where I pack a few different suits, and I don't even know what suit I'm going to wear the next day, but I know that all those suits complement my body. That's what's going to be the most important factor, is does that suit color flatter your skin tone with the tan? That's going to override anything with the background. But if I'm having trouble deciding, I do consider that in. So I would say that's a great advanced question, whoever asked that. So yeah, do you guys have more questions along those lines at all? I'm gonna say this is the last time I'll ask you guys if you have questions. So I don't want to take up your whole Saturday, but we did have some really great ones already. So hopefully just those topics that we use today are a good springboard for you guys to be thinking of these things. You all seem to have really great questions, like the depths of these topics to cover. So it's not just posing, and it's not just suits, and it's not just tans. There's a lot that goes into this. So I will say, if you guys do have questions, please let me know in the future. These are things that I really love to use for, social media, answering your questions, but also for my posing course members, because we do these live Q&As once a month. That's why I ask you guys what you want me to cover, because there's just a lot to know, and it can feel really overwhelming. So I am probably going to wrap that up for today. We did have a few questions that we didn't quite get into today, but I will try to find ways to still address those things. But again, reach out to me if you all ever do think of these things. We can always do meetings or consultations. So yeah, if you liked this and you found this helpful, I would say this is a good reason to kind of look into the posing course. If you're not a posing course member already, and if you really want to accelerate your posing progress, I would say to just go ahead and take advantage of the posing course, but part of that advantage is these discussions. The posing course breaks down everything you'll need to know from the poses, transitions, walking. A lot of the questions that we got into today, those are covered in the course through the stage scenarios that I've created for you all, and the testing material that allows you to understand what cues to use with yourself on stage. So I designed that to make it so that show day is as minimally stressful as possible, and you have answers to questions that you don't even know that you might have yet. So I would love to see you in the posing course. I love our community that we're growing around it. So if you are interested in that and you want access to the posing course, shoot me an email with your division. I'm more than happy to get that information over to you and answer any of your questions. So I'll wrap that up for today. If you're a posing course member of mine, I will let you guys know when our next June Q&A is. And I would just say, keep checking your emails, posing course members, for any updates on Q&As, individual posing sessions stuff. But keep sharing your progress with me and staying in touch with me. I really like following your all's journeys on social media. And thank you all for joining me today on a Saturday and spending this time with me, and for allowing me to share my experience with you guys. So thanks for your time. I hope this helped you guys, and I look forward to talking with you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you.